Y'all already know who it is, man. Let's cook.
Already captivated Houston and is about to captivate the entire country. It's about a woman suspected in the deaths of not one, but two of her romantic partners. A woman whose own son says he's been waiting for her arrest his whole life. Now, her name is Sarah Hartsfield, and she's the subject of a special episode of Dateline tonight on NBC. And right now, our own expert on the case, KPRC2's Bryce Newberry, is live with us to talk about it. Good morning, Bryce.
Hey, Haley, good morning.
Good morning. So a grand jury already indicted Hartsfield for murder. Those proceedings are secret, but you were there yesterday to witness two key witnesses who showed up to testify. Is that right?
That's right. So she was indicted first for murder back in February, and the Chambers County grand jury meets regularly. And so this particular grand jury has been impaneled since the beginning of the year, and they will be impaneled through June. And so yesterday they had several cases before them, including the Hartsfield case. And that's when our cameras were outside. We were not allowed even on the floor of the courthouse where those discussions were happening, but we were able to be outside of the courthouse. And that's where we saw the two key witnesses who showed up to testify in the Hartsfield case. The two that we saw were Sarah's oldest daughter. She was there from out of town and was in there talking to the grand jury for several hours. We also saw the emergency room doctor from Houston Methodist Baytown Hospital. That's the doctor that tended to Sarah Hartsfield's fifth husband, who died in the hospital in January.
So what was the suspicion that led up to the indictment? I know you said the indictments happen regularly.
Fifth husband. Heard that? Keep that in mind.
But what was it in this case that led to her indictment?
Want to keep your hairline where
diabetic, and on January 7th he was rushed to the hospital. He was unresponsive, and he went to the hospital, and once he was at the hospital, pretty much everyone in the emergency room, according to court documents, suspected that there was foul play. The treatments that they were trying to do to him just really didn't seem to be working. And so he died on January 15th. He was there for about 8 days, and then he passed away. So at that time, with that suspicion of foul play, the Chambers County Sheriff's Office, they did start to investigate all of this. And what happened before he was rushed to the hospital, according to court documents, is that his sugar tanked dangerously low into the 40s. And when they began their investigation, they found up to 10 insulin pens on his side of the bed. Now, the documents in this case allege that Sarah Hartsfield waited an hour to call 911 after finding him unresponsive, and then also that she ignored a phone app. And Haley, I know you're our health reporter. He actually had one of those Dexcoms, one of the things that monitors his sugar. And so there was an app that they actually had, both of them, in fact, on their phones that would send alerts based on his sugar level.
So they knew when it was going up or down. Bryce, it sounds like you're citing a lot of the court documents. So I guess you got your hands on them. Is there any other bombs that were, revealed in those court documents?
Well, there was a whole slew of court documents that were filed late yesterday in this case. Of course, we were in Chambers County as those grand jury proceedings were happening. And then just late in the afternoon is when those new court documents came in. And I think that out of all of them, the one that really stands out is a letter from Sarah Hartsfield to the judge explaining why she wants to fire her court-appointed attorney. She does have a court-appointed attorney who has been on this case with her since the very beginning. His name is Keaton Kirkwood. And in that letter, she one of the key things that I think stands out is that she said she wrote to the judge that she has volunteered and asked to do a polygraph test. She also says that she has already asked for a speedy trial and a change of venue. Those are usually things that come later in a case, but she did include that information. She also explained why she wants to get rid of her court-appointed attorney. She says that, he has explained to her that it could be 2 to 3 years of her sitting in jail while all of the criminal proceedings continue. And so she said she really doesn't want to wait that long because she doesn't want to lose everything that she's worked her entire life for. She also, I'm referring to the document over here, she said that when she initially met with him, he told her that her case was defensible and that reasonable doubt was there without question. So she went into a lot of detail. We, of course, have more on that letter with this story at click2houston.com. But what also got filed yesterday was a document from her court-appointed attorney. He is asking to withdraw from the case. He says that there's a conflict of interest. He basically says that his client, Sarah Hartsfield, has not been willing to follow his legal advice. And at this point, that conflict of interest simply cannot be resolved.
But Bryce, you have a lot of this information because of some text messages that she was sending you from jail. Is that right?
That is right, Haley. So in Chambers County, they've got this kiosk that they installed. It was kind of a pandemic-inspired system, and it makes it so that inmates there are able to, speak with people outside of jail regularly. Of course, during the pandemic, visitors at the jails were not allowed. So that it's an app and it's on our phone. And one question that we've got is like, are taxpayers paying for these messages? Actually, no.
Okay.
We pay per message that gets sent and received. All of that is charged to Channel 2. But we are able to communicate, and that's how these messages were coming in. And so she had told us last week that she had filed the paperwork to fire her court-appointed attorney. And I want to show you some of the other messages that she sent us. I know we have some full screens with some of the things that she has said.
Oh, yeah, let's
but one
pull
of
that
the
up.
first things that she said was with the ME's findings, the burden of proof for the DA just shifted significantly. They'd almost be crazy to proceed. I wrote my own motion for a bond hearing and mailed it with the letter firing Mr. Kirkwood. And I want to just explain that a little bit. She's talking about the ME's findings here. So initially, when the grand jury indicted her back in February, the manner and means of this murder were unknown, according to the document. It took a little while. It wasn't until March or so that the medical examiner's office got a panel of doctors together. They did a peer review of his autopsy, and that is when they determined that his cause of death was complications of toxic effects of insulin. However, they did not determine the manner of death. So the manner of death could be something like homicide, suicide, accidental, natural causes. So the manner was undetermined. But the autopsy, what they're really looking at is simply the body. So they're not, looking at any of the other factors when they're determining the manner of death, unless it's obvious, something like, gunshot wounds, and they could say it's a homicide. But in this case, they left it undetermined. So in that message, she's saying, that the burden of proof for the DA shifted significantly. Something else that she said is she said she loved Joseph Hartsfield, her fifth husband, with all she had. And she wrote that my story and the truth have me walking out of this jail free of all the false accusation I've been subjected, in addition to what is seriously character assassination on a nationwide level.
Fifth husband.
So after our story aired, with these messages from her, which she watched from her jail cell, she sent a series of overnight messages really all night long to me, and continued just railing against the reporting that we've done on the case, and also explaining her side of things, which we did an update on. But basically, she said if she's guilty of anything, it's picking horrible husbands. So it's really a lot, Haley. We don't, hear a lot from inmates, but in this case, so early in the case, we have heard so much from Mrs. Hartsfield.
That is very interesting. And yeah, you're right. A lot of times their lawyers will keep them from talking to us. But I guess she thinks that she has a story to put out there. So what's going to happen next?
Well, on these issues about a new attorney, because she wants to get rid of her court-appointed attorney, our legal expert, Brian Weiss, actually explained to us that that's not something she can just decide. That's something that the judge has to decide. So that's something that is supposed to be discussed in court on Monday. There's also this issue of her bond. So initially, Haley, when she went to jail, she was being held on a $5 million bond. And then on March 1st, the judge in this case lowered it by about $500,000. So it brought it down to $4.5 million. Well, now there is a second request, both from Mrs. Hartsfield herself, as well as her court-appointed attorney. They both filed and asked for the bond to be reduced once again. That's something that the judge will have to decide. All of that's happening on Monday. And, you know, throughout this case, we've learned about a lot of Sarah Hartsfield's past. She has been married 5 times. Her fiance was shot and killed by her in 2018 in Minnesota. That was a homicide that was ruled self-defense. It was justified according to the prosecutor, so she was never charged, but that's being investigated again. We've also been in touch with several of her exes, her children, people all over the country who have a past, and we're working on a special that you'll be able to see kind of the two sides of Sarah, which you'll be able to see in the next couple of weeks. Haley?
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you for your reporting on this, Bryce, and we appreciate you joining us live this morning. You can also watch more on this story on Dateline. Keith Morrison makes his own cross-country journey to unravel Sarah Hartsfield's mysterious past, her past lovers, wild allegations, even the fiancé that Bryce just mentioned who was shot to death. The Dateline adventure starts tonight at 8 p.m. on KPRC2.
Yo, 5 husbands is crazy. 5 husbands is crazy. I'm going to put some more context behind this story, because what I'm highlighting here is a portrait of misandry. Okay, nobody talks about this enough, but I want to bring up this article so we can, you know, dig into this for a second. And you guys can read along if you want to. Okay, so this thing says murder suspects 5 marriages and romances often ended under grim circumstances. Sarah Hartsfield, who fatally shot her fiance in 2018, has been charged with first-degree murder. Yep. Now, this article is from 2023, but I wanted to bring this to bear, you know. So the reason that this is important, she was in the Army. This guy was good. He was a good dude. You know what I'm saying? And over here, this guy, he was a good dude for most cases. And I just wanted to always be able to tell guys that your life is on the line. You know what I'm saying? When you're dealing with certain people. And this is why it's important to do some vetting, understand how people were raised, and really take into consideration that everybody's not you know what I'm saying, fit to be in a marriage. There was a lot of information that the reporter gave on the previous video, and to do enough damage to get a $5 million bond and then having it reduced to 4.5 still says a whole lot. And for them to go back and interview review cases, and you know what I'm saying, and go from there says a lot too. Leaves a lot to be desired. A lot of, you know what I'm saying, trails gone cold that lets you know that due diligence and due process doesn't happen for everybody the same way. It's not, especially not for men. You know, the men that live to tell it and share their stories, something to be paid. There's something to pay attention to, you know. So I'll read this real quick. Titus Colonel Child met Hartsfield when he was a junior at a small town high school in Missouri in 91. Married 2 years later, and their divorce was finalized in 96. Said while they were separating, she appeared to threaten him. Very surprised I got out of that marriage alive. Come on, man. Even his wife remained unwanted presence. Hartsfield remained an unwanted presence in their lives in the decades after her husband's divorce. So she was still terrorizing him. That was the first husband. And then you had Michael Traxler. Married Michael Traxler. In a brief interview, Traxler said that their relationship was super short and in the rearview mirror, having spoken to her in 15 years. Ryan Donahue, Hartsfield's son, said his father met Hartsfield in Alaska, married her in 99. They had 4 children and spent much of their time at Fort Hood, Texas, where they were stationed in the Army. They remained married until 2017 when Christopher filed for divorce. Hartsfield, or David Bragg. Hartsfield and 3 of her children moved to Minnesota that year with a new partner, David Bragg. Same year, 2017. They were briefly engaged. On May 9, 2018, Hartsfield fatally shot Bragg in their home in Northwest Minneapolis. Douglas County Attorney Chad Larson cleared her in the shooting, said he had no reasonable possibility of retreating from Bragg, who she said had fired at her. After Hartsfield was indicted that year, Larson said the case was active again as of Friday. And this was in 23. David George. Roughly 1 year after her fiance's death, Hartsfield married David George, who worked for a gas company in Minnesota, her son said. They lived together in the home where she fatally shot Bragg. So she married another dude, and he was staying in the house where she just killed this man. Hartsfield's ex-husband, Christopher Donahue, also remarried, and in 21, he made an alarming claim in court. His ex was plotting to have her new husband kill his new wife, according to an affidavit in support of a request for a restraining order. So he's remarried, and she's trying to delete his wife. She's not even with him anymore, obviously. The affidavit describes a plot to derail Christopher Donahue's efforts to get custody of the couple's 2 children. A judge granted the order in June of 21 and barred Hartsfield from contacting her ex-husband or his family for 2 years by the time the order was issued. Hartsfield had already filed to divorce George, her 4th husband. So she's divorcing the 4th and threatening the 3rd. Joseph Hartsfield. Final stop on the train. Hartsfield met her 5th husband, Joseph, online, and they were married at February 2nd of 2022. So the 2/2/22, her son said. By December, the relationship was in trouble. So roughly 10 months. Facebook direct messages obtained by NBC News showed her calling him a nightmare and telling a friend she had a plan to get out of the relationship. Wonder what that plan was. On January 7th, Joseph Hartsfield was taken to a hospital east of Houston. He died more than a week later. Authorities haven't released the cause of death. Hospital staff members believe that Hartsfield, who was a diabetic, may have had too much insulin in his system, according to an affidavit in support of a search warrant. After his death, Sarah Hartsfield said on Facebook that she felt numb and lost without him, and that she'd listened to old phone messages just to hear his voice. She often. On February 3rd, she was indicted on a charge of first-degree murder in his death. She pled not guilty. Her lawyer didn't respond to multiple requests for comment. He previously said in a statement to KPRC, "We are engaged in a discovery process and would remind the public to withhold any judgment until due process has been satisfied." So What have we learned from this? Fellas, you're gonna have to do some homework on who you connected to. Like seriously, you're gonna have to really take into consideration what presence of adults and accountable parents are in the mate, or in the lives of the mate that you're choosing. Is dangerous, very dangerous. You don't know what motivates people. You don't know what keeps them up at night. You don't know what they're into, and you cannot predict how a person's going to make a decision on your life. You don't know what drives them until you've actually vetted them and seen what type of environments they come from. The the way things happen in relationships, and how things happen to men, and how we're treated after that. You really have to take a story like this into very, very serious consideration. And then if not doing it for yourself, and if you got sons, you got to think about it that way too. So I just wanted you guys to take this into consideration, because the effort here on Beyond the Algorithm is to end the gender war. We don't need to be in conflict with one another when we need each other. We've seen enough, and stories like this are going to repeat themselves through your children. So I just wanted to drop that nugget. I'm glad you guys stayed up with me as an after hours presentation. Shout out to the people in the chat. What's going on, Tamika? Yes. And man, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Love y'all. Click like, share, subscribe, and I'm out.